Hello, hi everyone. Thank you for connecting. We're gonna just wait a few more minutes so that everyone willing to connect be able to connect, and then we start our second mobility meetup entitled Funding Pathways from Pilot to Scalable Investment for Urban Mobility Solutions. Thank you for joining, and we're going to start very soon. All right, then here we go. Thank you everyone for joining us for the second mobility meetup. We're happy to introduce this second meetup as part of the capacity building activities for Mobilities for EU. I'm here with my colleague Agostina Massarini, who prepared this webinar on this topic, and we're going to be discussing funding pathways from pilot to scalable investment for urban mobility solutions. Our experts are very knowledgeable in the field, so we're going to be very happy to be discussing this with them, to be able to ask them questions and also interact with them. So we're looking forward to this session and the interactions that will happen. So a very quick overview on the agenda. So we're going to tell you why these meetups exist and what is the project Mobilities for EU for the ones who do not know it or not currently partner in the project. And then we're going to be introducing our speakers, talking about designing fundable and bankable projects with the insights from GFI, financing public transport with a practical study from EMT, and then we'll have a time for Q&A and to see what the cities and what you as audience want to know. So why the mobility meetups and what is the Mobilities for EU project? So to introduce myself, my name is Cynthia Karaki. I'm part of the organizations working on this project, and we're working on capacity building activities within this project. Mobilities for EU is a project that has a lifespan of 5 years with a budget of 24.7 million euros. We are testing 27 mobility solutions with 28 partners all over Europe. You can see the partners on the slide and also the cities. So we're working with two main cities, which are Madrid in Spain and Dresden in Germany. And we also collaborate with 5 partnering cities that are Espoo, Gdansk, Trenčín, Sarajevo, and Joanina, who are all working towards better mobility and better sustainable solutions. So the project aims to prototype and test these solutions. We're trying to co-create these solutions with the users, with the people who are going to actually really use them. And this is happening through urban labs, where we are involving all different stakeholders and making people talk to each other, interact, give feedback, and provide better solutions to really contribute to the transformation of these cities. And what do I practically do? Maybe we can move to the next slide, please. So I'm part of We Right Click. We Right Click is an NGO that is based in France, in Paris. It is part of 3 o'clock, that is the private part in the company. And we are leading the urban transport labs for citizen and stakeholder mutual engagement. We're working on 3 different tasks, which are the structure and the development of these urban transport labs, the roadmaps, the needs, and all that within the 7 different cities. We are developing innovative urban mobility and logistics governance models for these labs. And we are now focusing on the capacity building and upskilling, which is the main topic of why we are here and why the meetups do exist. So many of these sessions are open to public, so we are happy to have you with us, even if you're not part of the project. And the topics were developed and chosen based on the needs shared by the cities. So if these topics echo to you, you were registered, and we're happy to have you with us. And we'll be discovering the rest with Agostina and our speakers. Thank you again, and we're looking forward to the interactions.
Thank you, Cynthia, and good morning, everyone. My name is Agostina Mazzarini, and I'm a project manager at the International Road Federation headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. We're leading the upscaling and replication work package in the Mobilities for EU project, and we're very happy to co-organize today's session with RightClick for everyone. So today's session is going to be focusing on a key challenge for many cities, not just launching mobility pilots, but being able to scale them into long-term fundable solutions. This requires not only identifying funding opportunities, but also structuring projects in a way that makes them credible and investment ready. But before we move into the session, we'd like to start by hearing directly from you. We prepared a short Mentimeter question to better understand what you see as the main obstacle when trying to fund mobility projects in your city. So I'm going to, yes, here we have the Mentimeter QR code. You can scan it with your phone, and I'm going to wait until many people have joined to launch the question. Remember, we're going to be coming back to this during the Q&A at the end, so please stay with us to discover the results and to hear from our speakers. In the meantime that you connect, I also remind you that there's an icon at the top here in your bar with the Q&A symbol for putting questions. Any questions that you will have during the presentations, we will address them at the end during the Q&A, so please remember to use that one. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're coming from, and yeah, great to have you with us here. So we have already 18 people connected. We have 37 online, so I'm going to wait just a few more moments. Thank you for all the thumbs up I'm seeing in the Mentimeter. 22 seems like we stopped there, so maybe we will launch the question. So the question is, what is your biggest obstacle when trying to fund mobility projects? We have already said some questions, but of course, if you think that your answer is not here, please do include it also in the chat. And yes. We're gathering the responses. I'm not going to show them until the end.
We already have 8 answers.
Yes.
It looks like this is working for you, which is a good thing.
Yeah, take your time, think about it. I know that probably many of these challenges it's not only the one you're facing, but we have a great panel of experts also ready to answer your questions. So anything that comes to your mind, please drop it. We're missing 4 answers.
You can also put your answers in the chat in case it's different. So feel free to jump in and put what's on your mind.
Yeah. Anyway, the Mentimeter remains open, so maybe we can just come back to the session, and if you want to give it a thought, you can continue, and then we'll see the results. So, to explore this theme, we have an amazing lineup of speakers today. We'll be hearing first from Harry Wayne, associate at BWB. He leads the mobility sector at the Climate City Capital Hub under Net Zero Cities, where he's supporting European cities in structuring bankable e-mobility projects and closing the financing gap. He's going to be setting the stage, introducing the evolving landscape of urban mobility finance, including the shift from public funding to co-investment models and the growing role of private capital in scaling city projects. We're going to then be hearing from Tom Park, Structured Finance and Capital Mobilization Specialist at the Green Finance Institute. Tom is going to be sharing insights from the Green Finance Institute on what makes projects fundable and how cities can strengthen their financial readiness. Last but not least, we're going to be hearing from someone that many of you already know from the project, Sergio Fernandez Balaguer from EMT Madrid, which is one of the partners in the project. EMT is a municipal transport company of Madrid. Sergio has extensive experience in sustainable urban mobility with a focus on governance, electric mobility, and international projects. And today he's bringing the specific use case, sharing a concrete example on how public transport operators like EMT approach the challenge of financing their projects. So we're going to be starting with our first speaker to hear from Harry and Net Zero Cities to tell us about the evolving landscape of urban mobility finance. Harry, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. Appreciate the chance to get to talk to everyone here. So I guess as a bit of intro, my name is Harry, I work for BWB, and we are a non-profit financial advisory firm made up of primarily investment bankers and asset managers. And we offer financial advisory services mostly to governments and sub-sovereigns who can't meet what they need to do for their transition or for their sustainability objectives with their balance sheet alone and through their budgets, which don't tend to meet, I guess, the entire needs. Could we go to the next slide, please? Just because I think, yeah, because it's got me on it. So our thesis, and I guess BWB's theory of change, is that this gap for sovereigns and sub-sovereigns, governments and local governments, should, to a certain extent, needs to be met through the deployment of private capital and investors. And that's what we're going to talk to you a bit about with this. So we've been asked to speak to you about, moving from pilots to scalability and what the evolving landscape of mobility finance looks like. So we'll cover that off through the lens of reviewing the work that we've been doing at the Capital Hub and Net Zero Cities. So the Capital Hub that we've been developing through BWB, we'll look at some of the mobility and transport sector that me and my colleague Shitakshi, who's on the call, have been helping to build as a part of this Capital Hub, and what the financing looks like when we're trying to bridge the gap that's needed. So next slide, please. Just as a bit of context for what the Capital Hub is. So I've been working across Net Zero Cities platform in a few different capacities for the last 3 or 4 years. And we started this work with the Climate City contract. You'll see a theme of Climate City coming up a lot in the names of what we've been coming, but essentially the Climate City contract is a sort of cluster of ambitious targets from 112 mission cities who are participating in the Net Zero Cities program in order to achieve goals of meeting 80% net zero net zero based on a 1990 baseline by the date of 2030. These action plans that they developed as a part of this have a list of very ambitious things that need to be delivered, but not necessarily a route to financing. So BWB and the Net Zero Cities platform have done a few things to build out the next steps from this, which is looking at the implementation. So the Climate City Capital Hub, or just Capital Hub, is in place in order to support that level of implementation and in order to help meet these needs across the target sectors in the action plans as delivered. So the sectors that this looks at are built environment, mobility, energy, waste and water, and nature and adaptation. There's not always a neat separation between these. So for instance, port assets, including solar, offshore charging, fits across a few different ones, but more or less we've tried to keep it discrete as possible. And then we've tried to deliver our support in the case of the work that we do across investor interface, capacity building and educational, data and analytics, and then project preparation, which is sort of what I'm going to be talking to you about today. If we can go to the next slide. I mentioned briefly about the I guess, the financing gap that's needed to be achieved across transportation. So transportation is a really interesting sector because it forms a part of critical infrastructure for governments, incredibly important for productivity, health aspects, and stimulating the local economy. And it also becomes a major draw for a city managing its growth and affordability because of the fact that people are able to live there and get around the city easily. And because of this, it's become highly politically sensitive in some instances. It forms part of critical infrastructure and also one of the primary goals that the city is trying to achieve. So we gave a presentation to the Swedish Investor Council earlier this year, and beyond the needs of meeting net zero, it's a priority sector that people are looking at. As a result, depending on who you ask and which research paper you look at, there's a large deficit of investment that's going into it based on what target is needed. But more or less, almost always 100+ billion euros a year is what's considered to be needed. If you ask the Institute for Climate Economics, this is closer to 265 billion euros a year between 2025 and 2030. And I think it would be generous to say that there's enough deployment right now to be meeting that. And even in some of the more private sector friendly areas, the investment run rate needs to pretty much double. The reason that it's not, or that we've seen that it's not been invested in as much as it could be or as much as is needed, is due to high upfront capital costs, which doesn't necessarily fit with municipal budget cycles. The fact that sometimes investors are unwilling to underwrite technology risk with fleet electrification, the underdeveloped revenue models or heavily subsidized revenue models. With one project that we're looking at, there's a 40% grant component for the ongoing costs and about 50% expected for the upfront costs as well. And I think this is really crucial, and it's one of the issues that we've been coming across. And as a result, we've had a sort of theme of support requests coming in from the cities that we've been looking at. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a few examples of support that we've been delivering at a city level. Sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. You'll see a few examples of some of the support of what we've been looking at. So we kicked off our work properly on mobility in Q4 last year, and we've probably been suggested somewhere between 15 and 20 active assignments coming in, and we're coming close to finalizing work on these 4. So the theme that we've been looking at is the feasibility of the rollout of bus networks, the electrification of fleets, and also charging infrastructure. So with a lot of these, the scope of work is hard to define specifically, but more or less it's either going from the early ideation stage, and the cities are aware of the fact they need this supporting infrastructure, or they are under the impression they need these buses, but they don't necessarily have the right roadmap in order to deliver on it. And from working on these 4 quite different geographies, but relatively similar sector, we've had quite a few learning processes that we've delivered. And as a result, we've scoped out our proper support activities, which we've started to implement in Q1 this year, and we're starting to scale up quite significantly. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you what that looks like. So in response to some of these, just waiting for the slide to change. Thank you. In response to some of these requests that have been coming through, which have been pretty diverse, it's been hard for us to template what the support looks like. But so far, we've categorized it into 6 key steps for the project readiness that we've been trying to deliver. So first of all, data gap analysis. Quite a lot of the time we're looking at messy data rooms, and we're trying to help to flag some of the data and also work on some of the more data analysis pieces that have been coming through in the project design and financing. So for instance, with Thessaloniki that we've been working with, a starting point has been looking at benchmarking data sets across 45 key case studies, coming up with a data compendium, and also delivering the code in an HTML script for manipulation and availability online. This means that when it then comes to developing the financial model, we're able to back up some of our data benchmarking and some of our data sets and the assumptions that we've been working on as a result. Step 2, or the second thing we've been looking at, stakeholder mapping. Within the value chain, of transport. We're looking anywhere between the manufacturers to the logistics of delivery to the operators, going down to the private companies helping to work with it, to all the different parts of local government. Coming up with a reliable understanding of who's responsible for what, defining some of the risk allocation across institutions is really crucial. And there's sometimes a need for alignment of incentives of stakeholders that isn't always there. So private companies want the assurances that political change isn't going to damage their contract that is in place. And governments also want some kind of assurances that operators and investors aren't going to go bust when a contract is given out. So after that, you can start looking at business case models and developing that based on the concessions that are needed. So looking at vertically integrated structures, separated of ownership, and also frameworks that enable relevant operators to have their feet held to the fire if needed. After that, we have been quite heavily working on financial modeling. So sometimes that modeling looks at just what the upfront and ongoing costs are for a procurement exercise. Other times it's looking at how investors can be compensated for putting their money out in order to support some of the rollout of these. Anyone who works in banking knows that money needed to be moved requires a model. But they also know that a financial model tells a story. It doesn't necessarily tell you the truth. So it's part of the exercise of what we're looking at. And then I'll rush through these, but essentially we also have been looking at additional revenue and risk mitigation. So how these things can be monetized more effectively, as well as implementation of how these projects can be delivered when it actually comes to rolling things out on the ground. On the next slide, please. Just to wrap things up, we've been working on looking at moving these things from pilot to implementation and reviewing how some of these business models are affecting the actual rollout and having to scale the impact globally. And I think we've learned a huge amount, B2B being within the net zero cities, of what things work and what things are not working. So in order to continue the scale between now and probably the end of 2028, we are looking at deepening some of our city level engagement and working with some of the more senior political counterparts, trying to support some of that coordination, as well as blending some of these, looking at building out some more scalable models which can support this work more deeply. I think one other thing we're looking at is whether we can leverage the scale of the Net Zero Cities platform to support aggregating some of this demand to drive down cost efficiencies, to reduce some of the bureaucratic measures, and also work at a more European Commission level to really take advantage of the program that they've helped to build. I think there's a lot of opportunity within the mobility sector, within transport, and obviously you'll hear from the next speakers who can tell you a little bit about what they've been doing as well. But ultimately, we're quite excited by some of the work we've started to do here, and we're quite excited by what the next steps are going to look like as well. I think, we definitely encourage you to get in touch to find out more, and feel free to ask any questions as well. We'd love to speak to you about it. Thank you very much, and hopefully I didn't go too over time on this. Happy to hand over to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Harry. It's great to see, everything, how the Net Zero Cities can support the cities, because Mobilities for EU is indeed a cities mission project, and most of the cities in our project have the mission label. So I'm addressing all the cities, and more especially at the cities in our project. Please make sure you drop all your questions for Harry, because we'll come back to them during the Q&A. So we are moving forward with our second speaker, Tom Park from the Green Finance Institute, to learn more about the different tools from GFI and how they can support cities in making fundable projects and strengthen their financial readiness. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all today. My name is Tom Park. I'm a senior associate at the Green Finance Institute. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. Today, I'm going to just give you a brief background on the GFI. I'm going to talk about why private capital can and often should be helping cities to deliver e-mobility projects. I'll go a little bit into the detail around the different capital sources and what role blended finance has to play before pointing to a couple of different case studies and financing solutions. I might have been a little optimistic with how much I can fit in, so the kind of the latter parts of the presentation we might have to move through quite quickly, but we'll see what we can cover. And if there's any other kind of questions, I'm very happy to follow up with people after this. But next slide, please. Thank you very much. So the Green Finance Institute is an independent platform designed to unlock private capital at pace and scale for net zero. We were set up with the belief that finance could and should be the enabler of the transition. And if you move to the next slide, please. What we do is we sit at the nexus of the public and private sectors to identify the reasons why capital isn't flowing, and then work with governments or private sector institutions to identify solutions that could help to address those, and then partner with key organizations to take those solutions forward, design, deploy, and scale them. And really, I guess, kind of from the point of the public sector and cities, often, we know that balance sheets are increasingly constrained, and there's also, a lack of capacity as well to be able to design and deliver the types of solutions that are needed. And so really that's kind of the support that we provide is trying to fill that gap. Next slide, please. And so the way that we work is trying to fill that execution gap. So at kind of national and municipal level, that can look like institution design, but also working on policy and regulation, new blended finance strategies, and then also helping with the design of municipal funds and supporting with investment readiness as well. So it's, from a public sector point of view, there's a variety of different things that we do. Next slide, please. And similarly to Harry's organisation, we also approach things on a sectoral basis. So and very much, that's kind of I think probably the reason that both our organisations do that is because this is how the financial sector tends to approach things as well. And in terms of, and obviously today the focus is transport and e-mobility. We work globally in across several different countries. I think we're up to 7 now, in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. And next slide. I think that kind of wraps up the GFI introduction. And I won't go into kind of too much on this because I think Harry covered it off really well too. But basically, when we're looking at decarbonising urban mobility, there's a huge opportunity for cities to reduce their emissions. There's huge amounts of EU cities that are committing to climate neutrality, and obviously the key thing that we're seeing when it comes to decarbonising urban mobility is is electrification of fleets and installing of charging infrastructure, but it can also include obviously things like kind of active mobility and public transport systems as well. And reassuringly, I've quoted also a very similar number in terms of the amount of investment required per year to decarbonize mobility as well. So basically, huge, lots of kind of commitments and a huge amount of capital required. Next slide, please. And so I guess kind of in the interest of time, I won't go into this in too much detail, but really, increasingly, private capital is helping to fill is helping to fill the funding gap, and that's because it can help in terms of scaling. It can increase the speed of deployment and efficiency, and also can help with innovation as well. Cities face constraints in budgets and debt capacity and competing priorities, and private capital can bring these different elements to the table, often helping where it is used, often helping projects to be delivered faster and more efficiently. And when we talk about private capital, it can mean a variety of different things, from kind of fully outsourcing to just the kind of the financing of assets, and I'm going to go into some of that in the next slide. If we could go on to that, please. So, I mean, these are all be things that many of you will already be familiar with, but I think kind of what's really important is just understanding, I suppose, the fact that there is increasingly a range of different options that cities can choose from when looking at support for decarbonising and their mobility sectors and for implementing e-mobility projects. At one end, you can have obviously kind of full public ownership and operation, but then there's increasingly different options when it comes to kind of just financing you can have the assets privately financed, but then still run by the state, or vice versa. You can have there's options for kind of full leasing models, or as a service, where effectively it's fully outsourced. And then further along, you also get kind of at the more complex end, you have concessions or PPPs, where private partners build and operate infrastructure under long-term contracts in return for revenue. And really these options vary depending on what we're talking about. For buses, cities can own the assets or contract private operators. For charging infrastructure, we often see specialist operators, or which could be utilities or charging infrastructure companies. And then you've also got in micro mobility the kind of private operators that are running the fleets there. And so really what the key takeaway from this slide is that ownership and operation can be separated in a variety of different ways, which allow private capital to come in. Next slide, please. And again, I think, so I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but really when we've been looking in the UK at kind of the approach that different cities are taking, there's a huge number of different options that and basically what I wanted to do here is just illustrate those different the different models that can be adopted, and kind of what the key benefits are. But very happy to kind of share these slides and go into them in more detail another time. Next slide, please. So I think kind of really when we're thinking about projects and whether they are kind of whether they're bankable. The key thing is actually thinking, okay, so if we're looking to bring in private capital, what is the credit worthiness of the sponsor? So that will mean, kind of looking at the credit history, the balance sheet strength as well. But then there are also a variety of different questions that investors will be asking of the companies that they're looking to invest in if they are undertaking these projects. So particularly if there are any other kind of competing priorities that the city might have and what the plan is going forward. And crucially as well, in terms of stakeholder alignment, whether there is a high-level project champion that can back the project, even with a change of government, such that it's not subject to the kind of changes in political cycle. And then in terms of understanding the financial credibility of the project, it'll be looking at what's really important is looking at things like demand. So if we're looking at kind of bus projects, it's what does ridership look like, and whether what the trends are showing is ridership increasing or decreasing, and then also looking at the costs as well, and crucially whether they're sufficient to cover OPEX. What's the plan for debt servicing? So there's a whole number of different questions, but really I wanted to highlight the ones that are relevant when you're looking at city mobility projects. And so these are things that it is helpful for someone working in a city government or transport department to understand that this is the kind of thing that their service provider partners will be dealing with. Next slide, please. And so I think what is key to kind of this slide and the main message that I wanted to get across here is that the point really is that capital comes in a huge variety of different flavors and sources. And so if we're starting to think about how we can move from pilot projects and grants, which can come from kind of a variety of domestic or international capital providers, that often don't, grants don't tend to cover all of the capex needs that that a project has. There's a variety of different things that you can look at, guarantees and risk sharing, some often provided at kind of national or EU level. The vast majority of external capital that will be interesting is loans or equity, typically from private capital providers, so kind of banks, but also concessionary capital providers like the European Investment Bank or public finance institutions at national level. And I think again, kind of obviously, the concessionary providers will often provide lower cost or longer term capital. And I think really one thing that I wanted to highlight with this slide is just the opportunity for, rather than using grants, I suppose, as the way of driving forward e-mobility projects, often what can be more useful is looking at things like guarantees or risk sharing mechanisms that can then help to make a project privately financeable. And so bringing in these different forms of capital is often a key way to make a project viable. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to very briefly, and we'll have to canter through the next few slides, but I wanted to highlight London as a case study for how cities can move from fragmented projects to a more scalable financing model. So next slide, please. So here, I guess, kind of is the challenge that that London had several years ago when it was looking at how it could finance its ambitious goal of being net zero by 2030. And really, I guess kind of what it wanted to do is, as I say, kind of move from fragmented projects to a more scalable financing model. And so next slide, please. Together with the Greater London Authority, we provided support to explore the different options, firstly by looking at international case studies to understand what kind of best-in-class options were available, particularly for kind of off-balance sheet solutions. Next slide, please. And then we, based on that experience and kind of how and the abilities and capabilities of the Greater London Authority, we explored different governance structures. Next slide. And crucially, as part of this financing facility, we identified the need for technical assistance to help build the project pipeline and provide assistance and skills for the borrower, and provide a link to the climate fund for Londoners with a public awareness campaign as well. So effectively, next slide, please. So where we came to in terms of the structure and the design of the product was a fund that worked as a blended finance mechanism that combines concessional capital from the Greater London Authority with funding from the UK public finance institution, the now called the National Wealth Fund. And what this funding does is offer long-term loans of typically around 25 years below market rates, along with technical assistance to help projects and bring them to investment readiness. Next slide, please. Actually, let's go for the one after that. And yeah, so what this does is kind of allows the boroughs within London to access climate finance for projects at a lower rate, the technical assistance, and it really helps to address that project development and delivery challenge that we see. And I think next slide, please. So what this the London Green Finance Facility publishes the results of its deployment every year, and this is available online, so very happy to share a link. But basically, it's been very successful in helping to unlock more investment for e-mobility projects and address some of those gaps. I'm very aware that I've run over time already, so I don't know, Agostini, how long do I have?
No. Feel free to go until 20, even if you want, like 5 minutes more, something like that. Don't worry.
Fantastic. Cool. Okay, so that's London as a case study. I'll go on to the next one, which I'll touch on very briefly. So Dakar. Next slide, please. So Dakar has deployed its bus rapid transit system, and it's basically a really strong example of kind of a bankable urban mobility project. It's been delivered as a public-private partnership with Meridian as a key private partner, alongside public and development finance institutions. And I think what's really interesting about this as an international example is that the project is structured around a clear long-term contract, defined revenue streams from fares and public support. But the private sector takes responsibility for the financing, building and operating of the infrastructure. So what Harry was saying earlier, around risk allocation, that's what this has been able to do really successfully. And that's exactly what makes this project investable, is the fact that it's large scale, structured, and with predictable cash flows. And it really kind of shows that when projects are designed well, private capital can play a major role, even in markets that in Africa that are often seen as more challenging than Europe. Next slide, please. So next, I wanted to touch on the different financing solutions that are available when you start to think about how you can move away from grants and towards a system that is privately financed, and what role blended finance can potentially play as well. Next slide, please. So the way that we work at the GFI in terms of designing financing solutions, the way that we tend to approach things is it's a very collaborative exercise in terms of, so we take whichever sector that we're looking at, we identify solutions that could potentially help to unlock the issues that we're seeing within that sector. We test those solutions to mobilize capital, and then once we've done that with a specific transaction, we then look to replicate and scale. So it's all about identifying solutions that can have an impact on a wider basis. Next slide, please. So the first solution that I wanted to talk about was residual value guarantees. Next slide. So what a residual value guarantee is something that could potentially be provided by the public sector, and it can help to unlock investments for example, buses or electric heavy duty vehicles, where we often have an issue around the fact that electric vehicles, particularly the heavier ones, have very uncertain future values due to the fact that technology is very new and it's evolving very rapidly, and there's a lack of resale data. And what this means is that if you're looking to work with a private sector service provider, the leasing rates that they have available to them might be a lot higher than they otherwise would be, because of that residual value uncertainty. And so we've at the GFI have actually designed a residual value guarantee that is a mechanism that could help to hedge for finance and leasing companies against those potential losses. And from the point of view of the public sector, I guess kind of really what this solution does is use public funding in a way that if you're potentially looking at a pot of money that would otherwise be grants and actually is used instead as a guarantee, what it can do is achieve the same cost reduction, but for a lower for the end user, but for a lower cost to the public purse. And crucially, what it does that grants don't do is that it teaches the private sector how it can invest in the sector in a sustainable and kind of commercially viable way. So that's something that's also worth considering when you're looking at the variety of different options is, are there guarantees that can be brought in, or is there even a way to repurpose existing pools of money as a guarantee to help those private sector service providers? And that's something that we're doing at the GFI, working with national and EU level government to try to deliver solutions like this. Next slide, please. Next one. I will very quickly talk about this. So we've also designed financing solutions for the charging infrastructure sector. So a key challenge that we have in charging infrastructure is that we need to be able to build out charging infrastructure ahead of demand. But unfortunately, due to the fact that private sector companies need to be able to make a business case in order to invest in a certain site, investment is often over concentrated in really high density or high traffic areas, And so areas which are less commercially viable don't receive investment. And so a loan provided to charging infrastructure companies that is flexible and tailored to the utilization profile of the charging infrastructure assets is a really effective way of de-risking investments and helping to incentivize the more even distribution and deployment of charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. And as a final point, products like this, so they're private sector products, but they can be de-risked with public sector money, for example, so we actually did a pilot project of this in the UK using philanthropic funding to de-risk a private sector utilization linked debt facility. And what this helped do is get the private sector comfortable and meant that, you know, the private sector could do more work than it otherwise would. I think that is all of my slides. Appreciate I've covered quite a lot in a short space of time. Hopefully I've not overrun too much, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Tom. No, I think, yes, like you say, lots of information, but I think very, very valuable for everyone. I hope you were very efficient, and it was great to see the different methods, solutions, but also the use cases. So yes. We're moving forward with our final speaker of the day, Sergio from EMT. We're going to be hearing now more in detail a concrete use case from a public transport operator from Madrid. So Sergio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agostina. Good morning, everyone. In the next slides, I will provide you the example of EMT Madrid as the public transport operator of the city. So please, if you can move to the next slide. Agostina already mentioned in the introduction, we are more than just a bus operator. We are a mobility operator fully owned by the municipality. We're quite a big company providing the service of a bus, parking facilities, including mobility hubs, which include also added value services such as shared mobility services, logistics, etc. We are managing the bike sharing system of the city, which is rather big and all formed by e-bikes. We manage the tow trucks service for the municipality. We also operate the cable car. And in terms of the service, I mean, the most important one, beyond those two additional, such as consulting and the advertising of the bus shelters, is the bus service. We have one of the biggest fleets in Europe, 100% green. The buses are running on compressed natural gas, electricity, and hydrogen. At the moment, our electrification rate is about 20%, so 452 e-buses. And last year, we moved to more than 500 million passengers. If you can move to the next one, please. So this comes from long-term vision. Let's say in 2010, we took the strategic decision of not buying any more diesel. At the end of 2022, we removed the last diesel bus. So we are operating 100% green fleet according to the European Clean Vehicles Directive. And as I mentioned, that means that we are running on compressed natural gas, electricity, and hydrogen. By next year, we will have to reach 1/3 of our fleet fully electrified or fully decarbonized, because actually the electricity we use to charge the buses is a certified renewable origin. So we have to have more than 670 electric buses. And the idea is to reach 100% decarbonization by 2033. So next slide, please. As you can imagine, that's a big challenge. We're very happy because thanks to this strategy, Madrid became the first major European city with a 100% clean bus fleet, which is a big news considering the size of the fleet. Next slide, please. Yeah, but as you can imagine, that means a big investment. So according to our strategic plan, up to last year, we have invested more than 1,000 million euro. Half of it, roughly, was for fleet renewal. 1/3, more or less, for new depots and all the charging systems, meaning all the infrastructure associated to be able to operate that electric fleet, and then 177 million for other investments, including technology and associated services. So we need to carefully plan these investments. It's not as simple as just, having funding because we are public and we are owned by the municipality. So in principle, the municipality should provide the funding for all this. Next slide, please. For instance, thinking about fleet, we are purchasing on average more than 100 electric buses every year. We have just recently awarded a contract to purchase 120 more, 30 of which are articulated buses. And when you think that a compressed natural gas used to cost around 330,000 euros and an electric one costs around €500,000, 550,000 euro more or less, and a hydrogen one goes above 700,000 euro. That means a lot of money. Next slide, please. And linked to that, you have to think about the infrastructures. I mean, we know an example of an operator in South America that did the big step of purchasing a lot of electric bus fleet, and then they realized they didn't have the means to charge them and therefore to operate them, because they didn't hand by hand the deployment of all the associated infrastructure. So here you can see an example of what we are doing in terms of this infrastructure, from upgrading existing bus depots to deploy charging infrastructure, such in Carabanchel, with more than 20 million euro, to the building of new bus depots, such as Las Tablas, with more than 200 million euro, to totally upgrade La Lipa with more than 120 million euro, helping moving forward sustainability and also therefore reducing the electricity bill by deploying photovoltaics in all our facilities and premises, or exploring the use of green hydrogen by the building of a green hydrogen plant in Entrevías bus depot, which covers the whole cycle. And as already Tom mentioned within his presentation, we have explored different options for all this. So traditionally, we've been a public ownership and public operation company, such as in Carabanchel, for instance. Then for the green hydrogen plant in Entrevías bus depot, we are operating it in a, I would say, public ownership, but service as a service, let's say, scheme, because the hydrogen plant has been built and is maintained and operated by a private company. So we act as clients of this green hydrogen plant. And then for La Lipa bus depot, that we just tore it down, and we are building it from scratch again to turn it into the biggest and newest bus depot at EMT, fully roofed and fully electrified, with a capacity of 320 e-buses approximately. We explored the possibility of managing it under a concession scheme. That hasn't worked at all. We didn't get any bidder, so we are now rethinking how to cope with this. So yeah, each let's say way of managing has its advantages and disadvantages, but all of them need funding. Next slide, please. So far, here you can see roughly the investments we have carried out in up to 2023, and then in the next slide you will see what we are forecasting up to 2027. So it's quite a big amount of money. So to help us finding funding, we developed in 2023 our sustainable financing framework. Next slide, please. And this document gives us easier access to financial markets or direct financing for sustainable projects. We drafted it, we developed it in accordance with the sustainable linked lending principles, the green loan principles, and the green bond principles that were published by the Loan Market Association and the International Capital Market Association. And there are 4 components: so use of funds, evaluation process and selection of projects, the management of funds, and reporting. So therefore, our projects, if they fulfill some sort of requirements, these 4 components may be classified as green and have easier access to this funding. Next slide, please. And to do this, we selected 3 key performance indicators and the sustainability performance targets to achieve, where the percentage of electric and zero emission fleet that has shifted a lot from just roughly 6% in 2021 to 25% by the end of last year. The estimated emissions of nitrogen oxides that also has reduced sharply thanks to the phasing out of diesel buses and the increase of electric fleet and the renewable energy generated by the photovoltaic panels. So far, we are using it just for self-consumption. And as you can see, we generated more than 6,000 megawatts hour in 2025. But our financing department is assessing the possibility of selling it back to the grid, because from a merely business model point of view, might be more profitable. Still, the regulatory framework is not that defined in Spain and in Madrid, so we are still waiting until that clarifies a little bit more. Next slide, please. So here you can see the 2 big eligible project categories and what's the use of funds allocated to those strategic projects that you can see on the right-hand side. Basically, we group all the projects we have within any one of these categories if they fulfill the 4 components of the sustainable financing framework. And a good aspect that provides some sort of reassurance is that, next slide please, it's been certified by a third party, by Capgemini Invent, confirming the alignment of the framework with those principles that I mentioned in the first slide. But this just eases the way of accessing financing, but you need to diversify. So beyond the public funding that comes directly from the municipality, beyond the public funding that comes from the PTA of Madrid, the Consorcio Regional de Transportes de Madrid, that mainly it's mainly to help us with the fleet renewal process, we try to find other ways. One way, which might not be that big proportionally, but it's also interesting, is the certificate of emission reductions for extra incomes. So basically, EMT has reduced more than 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent in 2024 that were verified by the Carbon Fund for a Sustainable Economy. And we have saved more than 3,700,000 kilowatts hour certified by the Ministry of Environment in Spain. So these are savings settled against EMT obligations to the National Energy Efficiency Fund. And that is what it meant if we translate it into money, these 273,000 euros. Next slide, please. On top of that, this is quite recent news. In February, we also reached an agreement with the Spanish utility company Iberdrola to monetize our energy savings until 2030. So we have signed an agreement to convert these savings into economic value. So we have sold our verified energy savings and energy saving certificates. generated through the electrification of the bus fleets, the upgrades in energy efficiency in the bus depots and facilities, and also the expansion and transformation of the bike sharing system in the city. So initially it's just 1 year contract, but it's extendable up to 2030, and the potential cumulative economic value goes up to more than 40 million euro. Next, please. Something also that you need to take into account for the financing is the savings in operating costs. So we have done some calculations, and despite that these graphs are a bit old, on average, the savings, thanks to the electrification of the fleet, goes up to 65%, and even beyond, in operating costs, and almost 20% in maintenance, compared to our compressed natural gas buses. So this is also very, very important to take into account when you plan your business model. Next, please. And then, what else can we do? Okay, for those of you that can benefit from European funds, I highly encourage you to take advantage of them. As soon as during the pandemic, the European Union announced the next generation funds, we even at EMT created a specific department to look for European funding. And thanks to this, and thanks also to the fact that we had a very clear roadmap with all the projects we had in the pipeline that we knew we had to deploy and carry out if we wanted to reach the goals of our strategic plan, we were able to apply, to submit proposals to many calls, and so far until 2025 we've been awarded with more than 174 million euro for different projects. In the next slide, you can see the examples. These are the calls, the different calls, and here you have specific examples of projects, of initiatives that that have been awarded. So from the purchase of electric buses to the purchase and deployment of charging infrastructure, the transformation of the bike sharing system, the upgrade of our mobility as a service platform, the adaptation of car parks, the installation of photovoltaics, the building of the green hydrogen station, the purchase of hydrogen buses, the drafting of the building projects of the new bus depots, etc., etc. So has been really, really useful. Next, please. Here is just a summary of those funds that we have received exclusively through the Next Generation funding scheme. That goes up to 113 million if you sum up all the amounts, and it's basically just to illustrate, to give you some specific examples. The participation in European projects such as Mobilities for EU is also something to keep in mind, because it helps you supporting initiatives that you already have thought of. In total, we have been awarded in the last years with almost 5 million euro. And so it's also a way of pushing within your organizations the active promotion of your internal projects. Next, please. So just to finalize some takeaways, according to our own experience at EMT, try to link financing to a very clear and measurable sustainability strategy. So basically, don't apply for funding if that specific project that is going to be funded is not within your own clear strategy. Don't lose time in doing something that is not really foreseen. Also, developing sustainable finance frameworks improves the access to capital. So it's also interesting for you to have this clear vision to access either to loans, to bonds, etc. Something that we have realized is that the public ownership does not preclude financial discipline, and we have also had to work internally a lot with our financing department and with all the different directorates within the company about the importance of being very strict when thinking about projects and of course thinking about financing these projects. Then, if we specifically talk about electrification and decarbonization, it's something that requires much more than just financing the vehicle. So think about everything which is around the vehicle, specifically charging infrastructure, but all the auxiliary infrastructure that can be needed for that. Of course, European funding and multi-level public funding are strategic enablers. I'm thinking, for instance, at the ENT, we also benefited years ago from a program called ELENA from the European Investment Bank to fund technical assistance to start working on electrification. And I'm thinking of, I don't know, organisms such as not only the European Investment Bank, but the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, etc., etc. Operational savings reinforce this financial use case. So try to also forecast somehow and get some practical examples to support this. And finally, this transparency and reporting and external verification I think are critical, but also, or basically, because it gives you trust and it gives you a very it's very good to get the confidence from those external parties, those third parties that will potentially be able to fund your initiatives. So with this, yeah, I think that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Yes, it was. I mean, Madrid is such a big city, and I imagine things only like are not easy to handle, and it requires a lot of coordination. But it was great to see all the different strategies that you mentioned at like EU level, and the importance of, like you say, being transparent and reporting, and really all the different strategies. I think were great and complemented also very good what Tom and Harry presented before. So before moving forward with the with questions for our speakers, well, we are actually transitioning into the Q&A session, but we are going to be finding out first about the Mentimeter responses. Oh, great. I'm going to ask my speakers to also take a look at what people have answered, and also what do you think? Are you surprised about this? Is it in line with what you think? Well, the top one seems to be that moving from pilot to large-scale implementation. Of course, one of the main topics of the session is still the main challenge, but we hope that today we gave you some tools to do about it, and then also the difficulty in securing co-financing. So I don't know, any of the speakers who wants to go first?
Okay. I think according to EMT experience, for us, the two biggest challenges have been the internal constraints, the organizational constraints, and also the procurement and administrative barriers. Because normally, when you opt for funding, you need to comply with very tight deadlines, with a very specific chronogram. You need to be able to demonstrate and to verify what you have achieved in very strict, timing. And as a public company, our procedures are extremely slow and lengthy. So something that we had to do before, years ago, the first step we took when this next generation funding was announced, for instance, was to create what we called the fat book of EMT. So we did a very extensive internal work with all the departments to produce a very, actually it's very fat, it's very thick document with all the projects we had to accomplish in the upcoming years, absolutely detailed which were the steps, what we need to do in which time, etc., to be able to double check very quickly in a very agile way if they were compliant with the requirements of the different funding schemes that were launched. So we also needed to change our internal way of approaching the funding of different initiatives. We even hired a person in each of the directorates just to deal internally with these funding issues. So we have a financing directorate, let's say. Then we have a specific person within the different operational departments, either transport, mobility, infrastructure, etc., that is also familiarized with these funding processes to be internally more agile. So I would say those two, perhaps.
Okay, Harry, Tom, do you have any comments or something to comment with Sergio?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we have seen a lot of these particular problems being referenced. So, for instance, with procurement and administrative barriers, it's I'm not a procurement expert, but it's something that we've been learning about, is justifying which OEM is picked based on which specific needs are needed to be met. For instance, with the UK, it's the green book value that's coming into it, building a business case. But the thing that I think is really interesting is moving from pilot to large scale implementation is something that we do speak with a lot. And a lot of this halts as well because and it's not just with mobility projects, but it's with a lot of climate centric and decarbonization projects, is that these action plans and designs are sort of pulled in early without necessarily bringing in expertise or financial or investors' insights early on in the day to make sure that the structure is built into place. And it's similar to a friend of mine who actually works in the creative industry. They would say that people building out a movie idea would come up with it as really exciting, and then they'd go to the funders and say, can you pay for this? And they would say, well, you haven't thought about any of the budgets in the upcoming of how this is built. So I think my answer would be that actually moving from large scale implementation requires including the right people early on. I mean, Sergio would probably be able to tell you the same thing as someone working on the implementation operation side, that getting the right people's opinion early enough along will help move that needle quite substantially.
Yes, indeed, structure is very important. Tom, thank you very much, Harry. Any comments from Tom?
I think the other two have covered it really well, but I think really, I mean, through the work that we've done in advising and supporting the Greater London Authority with the design of their Green Finance Fund, I think it's just incredibly clear how often cities don't have the capacity or the capabilities to do what's needed to take a project from a kind of early stage pilot to something that is fundable. And I think really that highlights the need for technical advisory facilities and the design of those. Obviously, Sergio mentioned kind of what's been available in the past at EU level, but really it's something that I think is often needed and often overlooked because typically cities want to use the money for deploying actual projects, but you really do need the skill set to take various different projects and to kind of sort through them and prepare them to create that pipeline. And particularly if you're looking, what the private sector needs in order to be able to fund is repeatability, and you get repeatability by building a pipeline. So I think that's a crucial part of any kind of long-term financing strategy, really.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to the three of you. I'm checking the Q&A here. We do have a question. I think it's addressed to you, maybe Sergio. Do we have Alessa asking, are those ECS the Spanish CAEs? I don't know if this was, I don't remember now who spoke about ECS.
What is C? If
Like
this person could clarify.
SS. I'm saying it in Spanish.
SS.
Yes.
I don't know what does it mean.
Okay, then Alessa, if you want to maybe ask in the chat, you want to maybe develop a bit more the question, we'll try to answer it. Okay. We have a quiet audience, not asking any questions. I guess everything was very clear, but I agree, everything was very, very clear. So we're going to just be moving into some questions that I have for you. Start with Harry. Harry, the first question for you is, what do you see as the most promising business models for city-level transport and e-mobility projects, and what key considerations are needed when engaging the private sector?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really important question. So from our work with early work, which we've been doing in mobility, working with a few of these mission cities, Cork, Thessaloniki, Suceava, Parma. Some of the most promising models we're seeing are varying forms of concessionary, performance-linked, and creating a structure which is able to separate ownership of assets from the operations. I think, and Tom spoke to this, but having a structure which allows the city to maintain a level of control of service levels whilst bringing in the efficiency, speed, and knowledge from the private sector and private capital has the potential to create some huge benefits for the city. And I think some of the really challenging aspects is matching these incentives. And I spoke to it a little bit, but cities are under intense political pressure to keep fares lower and manage availability rate contracts and charging prices which are affordable and accessible. But this creates sometimes revenue ceilings for operators, which can put them at risk if demand and costs don't materialize or if grants aren't maintained. So having credible assurances in the business models and in the structures that allows assurances based on leadership shifts or long-term contractual stability, clear risk allocation, and making sure that there's some protection for changes in laws is really an amazing signal to put to support investment. And also, the alignment needs to go both ways. I think a lot of cities want to be protected from making sure that operators are able to maintain these things. So I think having the right sort of financial structure, a bit like Tom said, the right sort of technical advice to help moving these through, it will support making scalable business models and things that can be repeated, because that's what investors are looking for. Thanks.
Thank you. You also highlighted a substantial financing gap for EU transport decarbonization. Which financiers or investors are currently showing the strongest interest in mobility projects across Europe?
Yeah, this is a fair point. And I think the good news is that there's a lot of interest, and we are seeing people who do want to ask, about what activity we're doing, and a few people are actively stepping in. And one thing that we've done to measure that interest and to create that interface is coming up with our Capital Hub investor panel, which is also a part of our work with this neutral capital center. So we previously called that our distributed balance sheet, but the aim there is that we are able to interface with investors and get, I guess, product feedback, market updates, and market sounding from representatives. And actually, one of the people there is the fund manager who was, I think, procured for the GLA fund, which GFI mentioned. And our aim is to make sure that we can get this kind of feedback to feed into our work with technical assistance. And these people, I mean, we're working very practically and very openly with the European Investment Bank, who put aside a €2 billion lending package for the work that we're doing, lending envelope. And also we are seeing some large scale deals on the fleet side. as well as from the charging infrastructure side. Commercial banks, leasing companies, specialist infrastructure investors are especially interested, especially with these guarantees that Tom mentioned, which improves bankability. Our role with the Capital Hub is trying to help coming up with the correct structure for these projects so that the scale is able to be attracted through creating a better business case, proper risk mitigation, and even working on the aggregating of demand to try and lower costs in the long term. So, we'd be happy to meet with some of the cities that are working here, talk them through some of our process with engaging with investors, and hopefully we can have a few success stories to share in the future. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, like Sergio mentioned, we have to look for financing at all levels, and yes, it's very important what you're mentioning about the role the EU and also like EU institutions like EIB have to play. We're moving now with Tom to a more city focused question. Tom, from your experience, what do you think is the most common reason why city mobility projects are not considered fundable or bankable, or even when they look technically strong and sound?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think really one of the key challenges when it comes to e-mobility projects is where the risks aren't clearly kind of identified and allocated, because what private financing is, what it needs is it can deal with 1 to 2 kind of limited risks, but if there is a variety of different things, it really struggles. And so what you need are kind of the right structures, as kind of Harry was talking about, that help to make sure that those risks are, the risks that you can address are addressed. So, I mean, the residual value guarantee is one example of where, an investor might have a variety of different concerns, and one of them being, okay, so what happens when this fleet of buses comes back, and how much are we going to be able to sell them for? If you can at least kind of address that risk, that might be enough for them to get comfortable with the other risks, such as kind of the credit worthiness of the operator, or the questions around kind of ridership and that type of thing. So I think really it's about getting the right structuring such that that risks are properly allocated and cut out where they can be. But I think one thing that's actually kind of worth highlighting is actually, as much as there are challenges with funding e-mobility projects, they are by far the kind of most fundable from a private sector point of view kind of areas. Again, probably agreeing with what Harry said, there's a huge amount of private capital interest, particularly if you're comparing it to other areas like water or wastewater or solid waste management. Anything where there is a clear revenue stream, like transport or energy, is much more privately financeable, and therefore there's a real opportunity where the project is structured correctly to bring in private finance.
Great, thank you very much. Very clear. We are almost running out of time, so I'm moving forward directly with Sergio now. Sergio, from your experience at TMT Madrid, what has been the most challenging aspect when financing large-scale projects, and what has helped you overcome it?
Well, I would say that the main one has been to manage the uncertainty. Because, for instance, electrification or decarbonization is rapidly evolving, not only from the technological point of view, but also from the political point of view or context, especially when you have to plan for long-term investments, such as fleet electrification or depot transformation can be, because it even can go beyond political cycles, which is always a very big challenge when you are a public company. So that's why I think that addressing this through quite a diversified financing approach can help. Of course, as a public company, we combined municipal resources, but also sustainable finance instruments and the European funds. And as I mentioned, I think one of the main challenges, and it's equally important, is to have a strong internal coordination and to work closely with not only with the municipality of Madrid, which is our only stakeholder in this case, but also with public authorities and European partners. That has helped really aligning strategy, funding, and execution despite this uncertainty. So I think that would be perhaps the main challenge, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do have like many other questions that I would like to ask, but we'll have to close here for today. If you still have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat or reach out to us, and we'll try to connect you with the speakers and answer them afterwards. I want to thank, of course, all the participants for joining us, the speakers for all your insightful presentations. I think you really, really highlighted that funding is not only about accessing the opportunities, but like you were saying now at the end, Sergio, like it's really about coordination with all the different stakeholders, but also having strong structures, different financing strategies and methodologies, and of course, risk mitigation strategies as well. So I'm giving the floor to Cynthia for closing, and thank you very much. We hope to see you in the next one. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agostina, and thanks to all the speakers that participated today. All the information shared was very interesting and helpful, and I believe that all the participants will have things to think about and things to explore after this conversation. Our next meetup will be beginning of May, so please follow our LinkedIn page. I put the link in the chat if you wish to know what is the next topic, and if you wish to participate. And in case there's any question that was not covered and that you still have after this session, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, myself or Eva, my colleague. Our emails are on the screen, and we'll be sending you also the link to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining, and see you very soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.